Welcome to another Deep Dives with us. This time, we're exploring something pretty dark and pretty interesting, I think. We're going to be looking at the Bear Brook murders. And to help us do that, we're going to be looking at this conversation between two true crime enthusiasts who are talking about the Bear Brook podcast.
Yeah.
So I guess that's our source material. And let's just jump right into it.
Sounds good.
So the Bear Brook murders, it's a case that, stayed cold for years, a true mystery.
Yeah.
But what makes it so interesting is how it really shows how much forensic science has improved, and especially forensic genealogy.
Right.
Like you can solve crimes now that I don't think people even thought about doing back when this happened.
It's true. It's revolutionizing criminal investigation.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So imagine this peaceful state park, right? You go there for hiking or just to be out in nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so now it's 1985, and we're at Bear Brook State Park in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Two barrels are found just discarded in the woods.
That's a horrifying discovery.
Oh, yeah. For
the first responders.
Yeah. Inside those barrels, the remains of a woman and a young girl. No identification, no immediate clues. Just a huge question mark in this, tranquil setting.
Right. Yeah, it's that contrast that's just so eerie. You have this beautiful, peaceful park and then this horrific discovery.
Yeah, it's almost like the peacefulness of the place makes it even creepier. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
So, and then get this right. It gets even more mysterious. 2,000. Two more barrels in the same park.
Wow.
I know, right?
Another woman and child, their remains left the same way.
It's crazy. 4 victims.
Clearly connected somehow.
Yeah, but nobody knows who they are for years.
Years.
Makes you think about their families, just left wondering.
Totally.
It just adds another layer of tragedy to an already terrible situation.
Yeah, for sure. So the case went cold for years, and the victims' families and the investigators had no answers.
Right.
But then we have Terry Rasmussen. This is our prime suspect.
What do you think about him?
Well, he's a really shadowy figure. He's got all these different aliases. He's a drifter. And the guy has a seriously disturbing history of violence.
Yeah, he's like this stereotypical criminal mastermind.
I know, right?
Changing his name all the time so you can't track him.
Yeah, he was like a ghost, just slipping through the cracks, leaving behind all this pain and all these questions.
And in the podcast, they talk about how he would prey on women who were in vulnerable positions, using manipulation and lies to control them.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that these kinds of evil people can be hiding anywhere.
Right. And that manipulation, how he would operate like that, is a big part of understanding the case. Predators don't always fit a certain profile.
Yeah.
They blend in. They use trust as a weapon. It's really unsettling.
Absolutely. So for years, the case was a total puzzle. But then there was this breakthrough. And this is where things get super interesting, I think. Forensic genealogy. It used to be something you'd see in a movie, but now it's solving real crimes.
Yeah, it's crazy. They can use DNA and public genealogy databases to identify victims and even catch the bad guys. I mean, it's amazing.
It's like they're unlocking some secret code in our DNA. It's so cool.
It's incredible technology.
So they had this decades-old case, no leads, and then boom. With a DNA sample, they can finally put names to the remains found in Bear Brook State Park.
It is a really powerful tool, but it raises some interesting questions, too.
It's like what?
Well, imagine this. You submit your DNA for ancestry research, totally innocent, right?
Right.
And then it ends up helping solve a crime.
Oh, wow.
Makes you think about privacy and all that.
Yeah, it's a tricky issue. But, I mean, in this case, it gave answers that they had been searching for forever.
Right.
So thanks to forensic genealogy, we know the remains in those barrels belong to Marlise Honeychurch and her 2 daughters, Marie and Sarah.
Wow.
And the other woman was Denise Bowden, who had disappeared with her daughter, Dawn.
So they finally have names.
Yeah.
Real people.
Real people with families.
With lives that were cut way too short. And their families had to live for years not knowing what happened. I can't even imagine.
I know, it's just awful. Learning their names like that and their stories.
Yeah.
It makes it so real,
It does.
And in the podcast, they actually have interviews with some family members.
Yeah.
And you can just hear the pain in their voices, the sadness. It's really heavy.
Yeah.
They wanted answers for so long, and then they get them, but it's like not the answers they wanted,
Yeah, those interviews are so powerful. You really understand how much this case hurt people, how it affected families, and it went on for generations. I mean, they just wanted to know what happened to their loved ones.
Yeah, and they talked to Marlise Honeychurch's sister.
Oh, wow.
I know. Decades she spent wondering, searching. And then finally, the truth comes out, but it's also the worst possible news.
Mm.
I don't know how you deal with those emotions, the relief and the grief all mixed together.
It's a lot to process. It's like this bittersweet resolution.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's Denise Bowden's daughter, Dawn. She was just a baby when she disappeared with her mom.
Right.
And Rasmussen raised her, but he gave her a different name.
Oh, wow. That's a crazy story.
Can you imagine growing up like that, not knowing who you really are, and then finding out your whole life was basically a lie?
And the trauma that comes with that.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom.
It's really a story about resilience, like how strong people can be even after going through something so terrible.
It is. It makes you think about the human spirit,
Mm-hmm.
like how we can adapt and keep going even when things are so dark. But I also wonder about the psychological effects. Like, how does something like that mess you up in the long run?
It's got to leave a mark.
Yeah.
So this case is full of crazy twists and turns. But one thing that's really frustrating is that Rasmussen died in prison back in 2010.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they hadn't officially charged him with the Bear Brook murders yet.
So he never faced justice for those specific crimes?
Nope.
That's tough for the families. And to not get that legal closure, he wasn't held accountable in a court of law.
Yeah, it makes you think, can there really be closure for the families without that? Without seeing him convicted?
I don't know. It's a complicated question.
It is.
On the one hand, you have the answers. They know who the victims are. They know what happened. But on the other hand, the justice system never really got to do its job. So it feels unfinished.
Yeah, I get it. It definitely highlights why it's so important to keep pursuing justice, even in cold cases. And the Bear Brook case really shows how important forensic genealogy is becoming. It's amazing how a DNA sample uploaded to one of those genealogy websites can solve a case that's been cold for decades.
It's pretty remarkable.
But it also brings up some ethical stuff.
Yeah. Using those public genealogy databases to find suspects, that sparked a lot of debate about privacy and consent.
Something we got to talk about as a society, for sure. Where do we draw the line? We want to use technology to solve crimes, but we also have to protect people's privacy. It's not easy to figure out.
Not at all. Especially as technology gets even more advanced. It's a tricky balance.
But you can't deny that forensic science has this huge potential to provide answers and closure. And not just for the families, but for everyone involved.
That's true.
This case also makes you think about how law enforcement agencies communicate with each other. Like maybe if they were better at sharing information about missing persons and possible suspects across state lines, things could have been different.
Yeah, that's a good point. Imagine if there was a better system for that. It's chilling to think that some of this might have been preventable.
It's a tough thought. But it reminds us that we always need to look at our systems and see where we can improve, learn from our mistakes, and do everything we can to protect people, especially those who are vulnerable. The Bear Brook case isn't just about solving one crime. It's about looking at the bigger picture and trying to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening again.
I agree. We have to learn from the past so we can improve our systems and keep people safe.
So beyond the facts of the case, what I really liked about the Bear Brook podcast was how well they told the story.
Yeah, the host is really good at connecting the victims, the investigation, and the science. It sucks you right in.
Yeah, and they use all these different things like interviews and old recordings and even music to make it feel super real. You're right there with the investigators feeling all the ups and downs of the case.
It's a great example of how powerful audio storytelling can be. When it's done right, it can take you somewhere else and make you feel what the people involved were feeling. You connect with the story on a whole other level.
That's what makes it so impactful. It's not just about the facts. It's about the human side of it all. How the families were affected, the ethical issues around using new technology to solve crimes, what it means for the criminal justice system in general. It really makes you think.
It does. It's not just black and white. It's a complex story that makes you think about crime and punishment and justice in a world where technology is changing everything so fast.
Wow, this deep dive into the Bear Brook murders has been pretty heavy.
It has.
It makes you think about how there can be such darkness hidden even in places that seem so peaceful, and how these crimes can affect people for their whole lives.
Right. It's chilling.
But it also shows how strong people can be. Like those families, they went through years of not knowing, of searching for answers, and then they finally find out the truth, and it's devastating. But they're still there. They're still going.
It really is remarkable how resilient people can be.
It is. It gives you hope. You know? Even when something this awful happens, people can still find a way to keep going and to heal.
Yeah. And it makes you think about how technology is changing the way we investigate crimes. Like, we've come such a long way from fingerprints and
I know,
eyewitnesses.
it's crazy. Now we're using DNA to solve crimes that people thought would never be solved.
It's like science fiction becoming reality. And it feels like we're just getting started. Who knows what we'll be able to do in the future?
Yeah, it's exciting, but also a little scary.
Yeah, for sure. Because like with any new tool, you have to be careful how you use it.
Exactly. Like take forensic genealogy, for example.
Yeah.
It's helped solve a lot of cold cases. But it also brings up all these questions about privacy and consent.
It's true. It's a powerful tool, but we need to think carefully about how we use it. We need to find that balance between solving crimes and protecting people's rights.
That's a tough one.
It is, and it's something we're going to have to keep talking about as technology keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, it's going to get more and more complicated.
Definitely. But I think the important thing to remember is that no matter how much we rely on technology, we can't forget about the human side of things.
Right. We're talking about real people here. The victims, their families, the investigators who are trying to get justice. Those are the stories that matter.
Exactly. And those are the stories that we need to keep telling.
Well, we've just scratched the surface of the Bear Brook murders. But hopefully this deep dive has given you a little taste of how complex these investigations can be and how much they affect everyone involved.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating case, and I think the Bear Brook podcast does an amazing job of digging into all the details. If you want to learn more, I definitely recommend checking it out.
It's a story that will stay with you for sure. And as you keep exploring the world of true crime, remember to approach these stories with empathy and a critical mind.
Yeah, because behind every case, there are real people whose lives have been changed forever, and there are always lessons to be learned.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Bear Brook murders.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep learning and stay curious.